Hi, welcome to an introduction to multi-channel funnels, a powerful new Google Analytics feature which can help you to increase your profits. My name's Dave Mullen and this tutorial is brought to you by Applied Web Analytics. So what are multi-channel funnels? Well, essentially they give you a new level of depth in Google Analytics about the full customer journey that led to a conversion. So this can really help you to optimize your website and your marketing strategies, your conversions, and ultimately your profits. So if you use e-commerce or online advertising and you use Google Analytics, this is big. In fact, anyone who's interested in how visitors get to their site, what leads them to sign up to a newsletter or request a catalogue or whatever you'd class as a conversion, this is going to give you a new level of depth in understanding how your site really works with visitors, especially with visitors who return to your site. So this is the first of our three-part series, all of which you'll be able to find on appliedwebanalytics.com. This is part 1, an introduction to multi-channel funnels and Google Analytics new reports. During these 10 minutes we'll introduce you to the principles behind multi-channel funnels and show you how to open up the new reports, begin to explore them and gain some insight into your site and its traffic. In part 2 we'll look at understanding how this changes data across your analytics reports. This has been a fundamental change in the way Google Analytics records data, tracks visitors, and it has implications for figures such as unique visitors and bounce rate. In part 2, we'll help you understand these and show you how to account for them and deal with them. Part 3, we'll look at beginning to use the new data to increase your profits. This is where we give you some meaty tips to help you know exactly where to focus in, where to begin to look at to actually see your profits increase. I hope you find these very useful. Here's an example. A user is on Amazon's Twitter feed and they click through to the new iPhone. They're really interested in making a purchase, but for whatever reason they get distracted. The phone rings, someone knocks on the door. For whatever reason they don't make the purchase that day. But don't despair. The next day they return. They type Amazon into Google, they click through, they get to the iPhone and they make the purchase. Now previously we'd have known nothing about the role of Twitter in making that sale. All we'd have known was this final part of the customer journey. What multi-channel funnels gives us is information on the full 30 days of interactions that that visitor has made with your site prior to any purchase. So we see the full 30 days. Now Twitter is given the full credit it deserves in bringing that visitor to your site for the first time. And you're much more able to understand which of your marketing campaigns have been successful. This is invaluable data for both optimizing your site and ensuring your marketing budget is well spent. One word of warning: Google Analytics still relies on cookies. Not these cookies you see here, but cookies left by Google Analytics in your browser, so that when it returns it knows that it's the same browser. This means that if a user doesn't allow first-party cookies, or if they use different browsers and different machines, if they come to you on an iPad and then return on a desktop PC for instance, you will not know that they're the same user. So let's open up the report. If you go to Google Analytics and make sure you're in the new version, then you may, if you've actually played with multi-channel funnels before, be surprised to find that they're not where you expect them to be. This is a beta product, and with any beta product you're going to see some changes. So it used to be across the top menu bar, but it's now in the left bar here. If you click on conversions, you get goals, e-commerce and multi-channel funnels. If we click on multi-channel funnels, we now see these 5 menu options. Let's go to the overview. The overview report immediately introduces us to a new figure. You can see here assisted conversions. Now conversions is a familiar number at least to us, but given a new name. This is what we know as transactions or sales. This is the figure that we've had in Google Analytics all along. This new figure, assisted conversions, represents those visits which led ultimately to a conversion within the 30 days prior to the conversion. So if you remember in our previous example where the visitor first came through Twitter and then through Google, the visit through Google would be a conversion. The visit through Twitter, which ultimately led to the visit through Google and the conversion, would be an assisted conversion. Now if we scan down, we immediately start to see some really cool data. These Venn diagrams here represent the overlap between different traffic sources. So the red here represents email traffic, and you can adjust that with these boxes here. And the, let's call it brownie green, represents direct traffic. So suppose you wanted to know how often do these two work together. How often does email and direct work together to eventually bring a conversion? Well, we can hover over this intersect here and get the exact percentage of time that these two work together. It's a whole new level of insight into the way your marketing campaigns can be complementary. Returning to the menu, if we now have a look at assisted conversions. This report gives us the assisted conversion value, which we saw in the previous report, but broke down by channels. So for paid advertising, we can see how often did paid advertising assist a conversion? How often did it play a part in the journey which ultimately led to the conversion? And we get the value. What was the actual monetary value of those conversions that were assisted? We also get the last interaction conversions. This is the transactions, the more familiar sales figures. And again, we get the value of that. And finally, we get the ratio between assisted and last interaction conversions. So if this is 1, that suggests that we've had exactly the same number of assists as last interaction conversions. If it's below 1, that tells us that there are less assists than there are last interaction conversions. And if it's above 1, that tells us that there are more assisted conversions rather than there are last interaction conversions. So this is a figure that a quick scan can give you real insight into where does this channel typically play a part. If it's unusually high, that suggests it assists a lot more than it finally converts. If it's unusually low, that suggests this isn't really an assisting channel, but it's primarily a last interaction converting channel. The top conversion paths report shows us how often specific paths lead to conversions. Now, it's important to remember that this by default does not include single paths, though you can include those. And typically the most common path is a single path, such as a user comes once through paid advertising and makes a purchase. But you can see here that of the paths involving more than 1 visits, the most common was twice through paid advertising. The second most common path leading to a conversion was coming through an email campaign once and through an email campaign a second time and then converting. And the third here is coming via paid advertising, leaving, and then coming directly. The final 2 reports, time lag and path length, are quite similar. The time lag report shows you the time in days between the first interaction and the final interaction leading to a conversion. And remember, as with all the multi-channel funnels reports, this only goes back 30 days. So here we have all of the conversions which happened on the same day as the first visit. This is those that took 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, and so on. The path length report is very similar to the time lag report, but looks at paths or visits rather than days. So these are all the conversions which happened after 1 visit. These are those which happened after 2 visits, so the visitor arrived once, left, came back for a second visit, and then made a conversion. 3, 4, and so on. So that brings us to the end of our first tutorial. I hope you found that useful, and I'd encourage you to have a look at the reports and start to have a play around. In November, we'll be bringing you part 2 and showing you how this change in the way Google Analytics records visits can impact your other data, maybe explain some puzzling results you've been seeing, or help you to avoid being misled by results. And part 3 in December, we'll be getting to the really important stuff. How do you increase your profits with this? Thanks for your time. Hope to see you again.